Hi, everyone. This is a great number of people. I apologize, there are not enough rows of chairs, but there are more chairs in the back, so please don't hesitate to move a chair or sit at a table wherever you would like. Thank you for joining us tonight for this discussion hosted by the University of Iowa Center for Human Rights, the Iowa City Catholic Worker House, and the Drake University Legal Clinic. I'm Kelsey Kramer-McGinnis, and I am a staff member at the University of Iowa Center for Human Rights. We are one of the sponsoring organizations, and we're housed here on the University of Iowa campus in the UI College of Law. We have a small staff of 6 people, and we exist on campus to promote human rights education and awareness of human rights issues here on campus through undergraduate education, research, graduate education, internship programs, and programs like this for the UI community and the Iowa City community more broadly. The event is also sponsored by the Iowa City Catholic Worker House, which is an intentional community and house of hospitality offering emergency housing, weekend meals, laundry, showers, naps, and clothes to all who need them. And they have been instrumental in helping to plan this event and bringing all these people together. And it's also hosted by the Drake University Legal Clinic, represented here by Suzie Pritchett here on the end. And she'll talk a little bit more about what that organization and center does on the Drake University campus in Des Moines. So again, thank you all for coming. I'm glad that you're all here. I'd like to introduce first our panelists. So working from this way over, this is Mark Pedersen. He is with the Iowa City Catholic Worker community here in Iowa City and also teaches in the Tippie College of Business here at the University of Iowa. And then we have Manny Galvez, who is also a member of the Catholic Worker House community here in Iowa City. He is also a journalist and activist here in the Iowa City area. We also have Rosalinda Velasquez, who is a recent migrant from Honduras. On the other side of her, we have Nicole Novak, who is kindly joining us as a translator here. And then we also have Jackie Torres, who is another recent migrant here from Honduras, and she will also share her story. And then, as I mentioned, there's Suzie Pritchett here on the end. First, we are going to have Manny Galvez share with us a little bit about the root cause of migration from Central America and talk a little bit about U.S. military intervention and economic imperialism. Like I said, he's a journalist who speaks regularly on these issues and is a member of this community and very knowledgeable, and we're really glad that he's here to share with us tonight. So, Manny.
Okay. Thank you so much for inviting me to have me here today. I was just a couple days in the TV, the first time ever, and like all the time I've been here in America, somebody asked me about the reasons. And I was thinking, these journalists in the TV asked me many times, you didn't see on TV, but they were saying, so the United States of America, he used to say America is responsible and they had the obligation. So for the last couple of days, I was thinking that maybe this country, we don't have the obligation, but we had the responsibility to do something about it, because maybe many people, they don't know what was happening in the last 30 or 40 years in Latin America. But when we read the history and the other side, we understand like we as a country, we have responsibility because we have done many things in these countries that they were not nice. And another thing, when I moved to this country, I knew like a lot of people, they didn't know what was happening, and they don't know what happened in these countries, but the most important, they don't know what was the role of the America in the countries. So I was just reading, for sure, maybe you know, but just in case you don't know what was happening in the last 30, 40 years, I want to start with Guatemala. In the 40s and the 50s, almost 2,000 women, they were like in a hard experiment, putting like a STD. American companies doing that in Guatemala. The government was elected in a free elections in Guatemala that was threw away, I would say, or put away actually, with the support of the American army and the American forces. And when you read about this situation, you are going to understand this issue didn't happen just in Guatemala, but also happened in the Dominican Republic, happened in Brazil, happened in Uruguay, in Chile. Usually here, before I moved to this country, We remember 9/11. Here is because we know what happened in this country. But in Latin America, we remember that day that was really hard with many planes and the army, support by the American army. They defeat, and they put away a president, Allende. So when you read all these stories, this is how we grow up. We are, I would say, we are the children and the grandchildren of all these people. So it's not unfamiliar to us what was happening in these times in Latin America. When I was in Mexico, I grew up when many people from Chile, from Argentina, from Central America, that we were flying away from all these situations. Many people, they don't know that right now, America, they have a military bases in Honduras. It's a tiny country, and you have 5 military bases. What for? You have in Colombia, in Ecuador, when the last government, Correa, the president of Ecuador, he said, I don't want this military base anymore. And he said, unless you give me the opportunity to have one in Miami. Obviously, the American government saying no. So this is the story how we grew up in these countries. We remember Nicaragua in the 80s, when the American government was selling in the black market the guns to the government in some way. We remember, for example, right now, what is happening in Mexico. This is so important because we grew up with this situation. Always I say we didn't want to leave our countries. Who wants to leave the family? Who wants to leave the friends, your culture? Be forced to learn quickly and perfectly another language. You don't want to do that. Nobody wins in these situations. This is the most important. I remember Bush was in power. Thousands of guns that were sent to Mexico, supposedly to track the cartels. What happened after 10 years? That guns there, nobody knows where they are. The most, I would say, the cartel is called the Zetas, the Cs. They were training in America, in a military base, supposedly because they were going to be attacking or fighting the cartels. After several years in America military base, all these soldiers, they were fired. Just imagine who is in charge of the cartels in Mexico. Just to mention numbers, and this is the reasons why we leave our countries. In Argentina, more than 30,000 people disappeared in the 70s. Right now in Mexico, with the war against the drugs, more than 100,000 people haven't died in the last 10 years. 30,000 people right now, while we are talking right now, we don't know where they are. So this is the thing happening in our countries. In Central America, we are going to find it's the same situation in the history in the last 20, 30, 40 years. So I think when you read this news, when you read the history, what was happening in the human rights, we have to remember just right now, Monseñor Romero in El Salvador, he was assassinated, he was killed with the support of the American government. So all these stories, we are the product of this situation. I remember after the Second World War, I learned in the school, in middle school, and the university, that we had the Monroe policy, American for the Americans. But the thing we never knew is we were no Americans. The idea that America for the Americans is America for the United States. So we need to understand these situations. Just in 4 or 5 minutes, this is the main reasons why we are responsible. And I can understand that is the past. But in order to have a better future for everybody, we need to know what happened in the future, we were responsible. And again, immigration is not happening just here in this continent, it's happening in Africa. It's happening in Australia. Right now, many people is in cages in Australia, in the islands. Thousands of immigrants are dying in Africa. Every year, hundreds of people die in the desert. So this is the thing like we need to understand. We don't know. I mean, we don't know, and the most important, we don't want to come to this country just because one day in the morning say, oh, you know what? Bye, family. The conditions, they are really hard. Something like they didn't say in the TV yesterday. For example, just to mention one company, Walmart, has like 1,000, just talking about Mexico, more than 10,000 elders, talking about 60 years and older, more than 10,000, and they don't have a contract in Walmart. They work every day based just in the tips. You want to stop the migration? Be fair. But we need to speak out here. So I think this is our responsibility to know what is happening, but the most important, what happened in the past. We cannot do so much about that, but we can do so much about the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Manny, for that background. And in the interest of giving a little bit of additional background for the stories that we're going to hear here tonight, we're going to show a brief documentary just to give a little bit more background on what's happening in Honduras and the experiences of people who are fleeing there and the reasons why they're fleeing. And then we'll hear from our panelists about their stories.
Now to the immigration turmoil at the U.S.-Mexico border, where Customs and Border Control officials say they are on track to make one...
Sorry, this is always the nightmare.
Now to the immigration turmoil at the U.S.-Mexico border, where Customs and Border Control officials say they are on track to make 100,000 apprehensions this month alone. Many of those people come from Central America, and even as the president again threatened this week to withhold aid and shut the border because of the migration, his administration signed a pact with several of those same nations to bolster their internal security. With the support of the Pulitzer Center, special correspondent Marcia Biggs and videographer Julia Galeano Rios recently traveled to San Pedro Sula in Honduras to see why so many are fleeing their home.
They came from far and wide, migrants from all parts of Honduras, gathering at the bus station in San Pedro Sula and settling in for a long night of camping out before a dawn departure. It wasn't clear why or who made the decision, but 8 hours earlier than planned, this caravan of families set off on the harrowing journey to the United States. It wasn't long before the weather turned nasty, but the people pressed on. Some have suggested that the caravans were organized by political activists, but there was no organization here, only desperation.
They were supposed to leave at 5 o'clock in the morning tomorrow. They left at 9 o'clock in the pouring rain. We've got entire families with toddlers, babies. They've got nothing but the clothes on their backs, and they don't even really know where they're going. They're just following the crowd, hoping for a better life.
I know that it will be a difficult journey, says 19-year-old Alicia, as she cradles her 8-month-old baby. But I want a better life for my son. Olman Del Cid said he had no choice but to start walking with his wife and 5 children.
It is too dangerous here. We can't stay here. There is no work, and I can't afford to pay the extortion.
Their numbers were nothing like the some 7,000 that marched through Central America and into Mexico last October. Estimates put this group at around a third of that, but they are no less determined. Yolanda Gonzalez has worked as a human rights activist in Honduras for the last 17 years.
It's like one boy told us, why am I leaving? Because in my neighborhood, you're more likely to get shot than to find a job. When you ask people why they are leaving or why once deported they try to go back, the story typically starts with, well, I'm leaving for economical reasons. But when you start to inquire further, they say, I had my bodega, but I lost it because of extortion, violence, and because I don't have anyone to report to who can protect me. I can't go to the police because the police won't protect me. And what's more, I'm afraid of the police. Therefore, I have no other choice but to leave. And if I get deported, I will try again.
San Pedro Sula used to be the murder capital of the world, held hostage by gangs. The most prominent, MS-13 and the 18th Street gangs. But a crackdown led by the government of President Juan Orlando Hernandez, fueled by American dollars, has led to a much-touted decrease in homicide rates, down over 1/3 since 2011. Yet the people still live in fear.
But we keep hearing that the homicide rates are down, that crime is down, violence is down. Do you not believe that?
No.
No. I think there are a lot of tricks there. Sometimes a half-truth is more harmful than a lie. Oddly enough, the homicide rate started to fall when the counting methodology changed. Now only police can give that data. Before, the data was compared with other sources. Now it's just one source.
Representatives of the government did not grant our interview requests, but everyone we spoke to talked about extortion by gangs, a concept so normalized it's referred to as war tax. As we drove around some of the poorest neighborhoods in San Pedro Sula, we saw home after home abandoned by those who couldn't afford to pay. 33-year-old Gabriela Gonzalez is one of those people, too scared of the gangs to let us show her face. She lived illegally in the United States for 8 years, finally making enough money to buy 3 cars and start a small taxi company. She returned to her country full of hope.
Y pues el primer año me fue bien.
It went well during the first year. In 2014, I started to pay the first war tax. By the middle of the following year, I got the other war tax. Then it was 2 war taxes. I endured. I thought I could. When I got the 3rd war tax, I said no more.
To pay 1 war tax is normal, but you just couldn't handle 3.
Yes. They don't care if you're sick, if you have someone in the hospital, or if your car broke down. Even if you don't want to be involved, they'll get you involved. Do you understand? When they look for you, they already know all your moves.
Do you know of other people that haven't paid the war tax?
People who are now under the ground.
She says her husband got sick last year and they got behind in their payments. One day, a truck pulled up to their home and 5 men got out, giving them 15 minutes to come up with the cash. She says they stalled them and ran.
What do you think would have happened if you hadn't run away, if you hadn't left?
I wouldn't be sitting here telling this story.
They are now living in hiding. Gabriela's changed her hair and rarely goes outside. She and her mother run a small restaurant out of the house, but today we were the only customers. They sold their nest egg of taxi cabs, keeping one just for emergencies. A constant reminder of the hope they once felt, which was dashed in an instant.
On one Sunday afternoon, we had to make the decision to leave, running away from our own country. I'm telling you, I wouldn't be sitting here. My whole family would be under the ground, because this has happened to other families who didn't pay the war tax. They start by taking your work, your income, then they take your life.
Like most Hondurans we met, Gabriela never filed a report and therefore has no evidence of the threats. Yolanda Gonzalez says reporting crime accomplishes nothing.
I understand that in the United States, when people are apprehended, they are told, but you didn't file a report. Of course, if you casually ask someone here why they didn't file a report, they would answer, what for, when it doesn't do anything?
We went to talk to police in Rivera Hernandez, one of the toughest areas controlled by gangs. They took us to some of the areas they say they've taken back.
We've been in this neighborhood several times and always with members of the local community, and it's been really difficult to film. It's been a struggle, I mean, highly sensitive, because they kept saying, oh, you know, the gang is always watching. Now we're here with police, and of course the access is great, but nobody will talk to us. Everyone has retreated into their homes. There's a real culture of mistrust.
They took us to an area which they say used to be a dumping ground for bodies. They're proud of the lowered murder rates and claim to have taken back this neighborhood. But it's practically deserted. While the government statistic on violence may be down from a peak in 2011, the murder rate here remains among the highest in the world. And it's fear that drives people out. We're told that 5 families from this street alone left on the latest caravan. Gabriela's sister is an American citizen and has filed a petition to bring her to the U.S. legally. But Gabriela says that she can't wait any longer and will try to go anyway, even though it may hurt her case if she tries to cross illegally.
Have you heard what people are saying in the United States about people coming from Honduras?
que nos tratan como animales.
That they treat us like animals, that we're going to contaminate the United States, that most of us are bad people. It's not like that. As with everything else, in other countries there are bad people and good people.
Are you worried about what will happen to you when you get there? You could be detained, you could be separated from your grandson.
Sí.
Yes, it worries me. It worries me a lot. Because I know that they won't understand my situation.
Que ellos no van a entender la situación mía.
So even though you know you may not make it, you're still going?
Sí.
Yes, for my children. I know they are going to have something better in every way. You don't have the freedom for that here.
Ya que aquí uno no tiene la libertad.
You don't have the freedom for anything.
A week later, Gabriela left Honduras with her daughter and grandson, setting off for the brutal journey north. For the PBS NewsHour, I'm Marcia Biggs in San Pedro Sula, Honduras.
So important to report this. And an update, since Marcia filed her story, unlike so many who try and fail, Gabriela actually made it across the border. She is currently in the U.S. and beginning the process of applying for legal asylum. Tomorrow, the series continues on PBS NewsHour Weekend with a closer look at one of the poorest and most dangerous neighborhoods in San Pedro Sula and how members of the community are trying to help those left behind.
All right, well, we welcome our panelists back up. Mark Pedersen will be conducting these interviews, and Nicole Novak will be doing translations. Our first story is coming from Rosalinda Velasquez, who fled Honduras with her family and is now living in the Iowa City area.
Rosalinda, hola y gracias. Dona Rosalinda, I know that video, the documentary, hit pretty close to home. You and your husband were small business owners in Honduras until the gangs extorted your family for money, killed your husband when you refused to pay, and later tried to forcibly recruit your son. Can you tell us a little bit more of your story of what life was like in Honduras and why you decided to come north?
Doña Rosalinda, yo sé que este video fue algo emocional para usted. Usted y su esposo tenían un negocio pequeño allí en Honduras. La Mara MS-13 extorsió a su familia y mataron a su esposo, y cuando usted no pagaba el extorsión, intentaron reclutar a su hijo. ¿Nos puede contar más sobre su historia y por qué salió de Honduras?
El motivo de haber salido de Honduras fue porque a mi esposo lo mataron porque no pagó su cuota que ellos piden.
The reason we left Honduras was because my husband did not pay the amount that they demanded of him.
Y después puse mi negocio. Cuando él falleció, yo puse mi negocio. Y entonces ya ellos ya mandaban llamadas para que yo les pagara también una cuota a ellos.
So when he died, I started my own business to support the family, and they started calling me and demanding the same amount of money from me.
Y me dijeron ellos, cuando me llamaron, me dijeron de que si yo no les pagaba lo que ellos me pedían, me iban a secuestrar el niño.
And they told me when they called that if I didn't pay what they were demanding, that they were going to kidnap my son.
Entonces, cuando me mandaron a decir eso, yo tuve que salir de mi país para México.
So when they told me that, I knew I had to leave my country and go to Mexico.
En México estuve 2 meses. Yo no me vine con guías, no, que yo tenía mi visa para México.
I was in Mexico for 2 months. I didn't come with a guide, I had a visa to be in Mexico.
Después, o sea que yo me vine para México, pero no con intención de venirme. Y de México yo tomé la decisión de venirme porque mis vecinos me hablaron que no regresara a mi casa porque venían ellos a mi casa a buscarme.
And when I went to Mexico, I wasn't actually planning to come all the way to the United States. But my neighbors in Honduras told me that they were still coming to my house to see if we were there and that I shouldn't come back to Honduras.
Entonces yo ahí tomé la decisión. Tengo una hermana aquí en Iowa City y ella me dice que mejor me viniera para acá, que mejor pásate para el otro lado. Me dice, ya no vayas porque corres peligro.
And so then I made the decision to come up here. I have a sister here in Iowa City, and she said, come on up here. You shouldn't take the risk of going back. Come up here.
Y después así fue, yo me pasé nadando por el río con mis 2 niños.
So then I crossed the border, and I crossed the border swimming with my 2 children.
Ellos ya sabían nadar y entonces yo dije, yo me voy a tirar, digo yo, porque yo sabía nadar y ellos me dicen, nosotros también nadamos bien, pasémoslos, me dicen, entonces los pasamos, ya al otro lado ya estaba migración y ahí ya los agarraron.
I said we should swim, and my children said, oh, that's fine, we know how to swim too. And so we all swam across the river. When we got to the other side, the immigration agents were there, and that was when they met us.
Ya cuando ya estábamos ahí en migración, ya, pero no los trataron bien ahí, cuando ya estuvimos, ya después, ya nos pidieron los datos y todo.
So when we got there, immigration agents were there, and they treated us okay. They brought us to a place, and that was where they asked us for all the information about our asylum case.
Rosalinda, you've been in Iowa City for over a year now, and your children are going to school.
Un año. Sus niños asisten a la escuela aquí y usted trabaja en un hotel mientras pasas por el proceso de asilo. ¿Cómo es para usted mirar una historia, un video, como miramos esta noche?
Sí, para uno cuando yo veo estas noticias es bien triste. Y a veces yo no me gusta verlas, a veces.
For me, seeing a video like this is really sad, and sometimes I don't really want to watch it.
Thank you so much for sharing your story, Rosalinda.
Gracias por compartir su historia.
Hola, Jackie.
Hola.
¿Cómo estás?
Bien.
This is Jackie Torres Toro. Senor Jackie, you came here recently on the migrant caravan in December. You have a similar story to Rosalinda and the women from the video. Your father and brothers and husband were all workers and were all extorted and assaulted by gangs. Can you tell us a little bit about what life was like in Honduras before you were forced to leave?
Señora Jackie, usted tiene una historia parecida a la historia de Rosalinda. Usted llegó en la caravana de inmigrantes y antes de salir de Honduras, su papá y sus hermanos y su esposo fueron trabajadores que fueron asaltados o extortados por las maras. ¿Cómo era la vida en Honduras para usted?
Pues hace 9 años, casi 10, murió mi esposo. Lo mataron la banda de la MS. Lo mataron por asaltarlo, dicen, pero no fue así. Fue víctima, una más.
So 9 to 10 years ago, my husband died. He was killed by the Mara Salvatrucha, which is one of the gangs there. And they said they killed him like in a specific attack, but it was an accident. It wasn't supposed to happen.
Luego después, pues pasando 9 años, el 12 de febrero del 2018, mi hermano tuvo un atentado también.
And then 9 years later, on February 12th, 2018, my brother was also attacked.
Tuvo un atentado de que llegaron los delincuentes de las maras a decirle a mi hermano que no era un asalto, sino un atentado contra el chofer y el ayudante, y ellos andaban trabajando.
What happened with my brother, he was working as an assistant on a bus, and the gang members arrived to the bus and said that they were going to kill the driver and him.
Entonces mi hermano dijo que en su mente dijo que él no iba a permitir que lo mataran. Entonces él se tiró de la unidad.
My brother said to himself in his mind, he said, I'm not going to let them kill me. And so he threw himself out of the bus.
Él se tiró de la unidad y el chofer, pues lamentablemente lo mataron a él, sí.
He threw himself out of the bus, but the driver, unfortunately, they did kill the driver.
Luego después mi hermano salió del hospital. Después, a los 2 meses, mi papá tuvo un atentado también en el bus.
My brother was hospitalized for about 2 months, and then later, soon after he got out of the hospital, there was an attack on my father.
Entonces llegaron pues le dieron 2 tiros en su cabeza. Gracias a Dios no se los pegaron, solo le rozaron, pero para ellos asegurarse que lo mataron.
What happened with my dad is they fired 2 shots at his head, and just luckily the shots didn't actually penetrate, they just grazed his head. But it was true, they said they had tried to attack him on purpose.
Entonces agarraron unos palos y le dieron hasta dejarlo casi muerto.
They saw that he was still moving, and so they grabbed some sticks and they hit him until he was almost dead.
Pues mi papá pues salió del hospital, gracias a Dios, quedó medio cuerdo, y pues ya el 17 de octubre nos llegó una nota que teníamos que irlos.
So my dad got out of the hospital. He was severely injured. We were all back in the house. And on October 17th, we got a note that said we were going to have to leave.
Nos dijeron que la nota decía que solo lo daban 24 horas para irlos de la casa, porque ya habían ubicado a mi hermano, porque mi hermano vio cuando mataron al chofer de la unidad, y por eso lo querían matar a mi hermano y a toda su familia.
The note told us that we had 24 hours to leave, and the reason they said that is because they had figured out that my brother was there, and because my brother had seen them shoot the driver, they said he needed to get out of there or they're going to kill our entire family.
Entonces, pues, nosotros los tuvimos que venir a emigrar, y no fue porque quisimos.
So we had to come and immigrate. We didn't do that because we wanted to do it.
Veníamos huyendo de las malas. Teníamos miedo que los mataran a todos. Por eso nos tuvimos que venir a huir.
We came fleeing from the gangs. We came because they said they were going to kill us. That's why we came. We were fleeing.
Pues como no conocía ni para dónde venía, entonces yo llegué solo hasta Agua Caliente.
And I didn't really have any idea where we were going, so I just made it to Aguas Calientes.
Pues de ahí dijeron una gente de la caravana que venían caminando, huyendo siempre de la delincuencia, de las pandillas, del hambre, de todo, venían huyendo. Entonces yo me tuve que unir a ellos, a venirme caminando 5,000 kilómetros desde Honduras hasta Tijuana.
So I came with all these other people. We were all part of a caravan. We were all fleeing. We were fleeing delinquency. We were fleeing gangs. We were fleeing hunger. And we all came together walking over 5,000 kilometers all the way up to Tijuana.
Pues esa es mi historia.
Well, that's my story.
Thank you so much, Jackie. Is there anything that you'd like to tell us about your experience in Tijuana or crossing the border? I know that your sister and another friend are being held at the border right now. Are you hearing anything from them about what life is like right now?
¿Hay algo más que a usted le gustaría contarnos sobre Tijuana y la frontera? Yo sé que su hermana y otro amigo de Honduras está en la frontera ahora.
Están presos ahorita. Ellos se vinieron en la caravana, pues uno se vino en la caravana junto conmigo, me vino ayudando con mi niño, y ahorita él está preso.
So they're down there right now. One of them came in the caravan with me and my sister, and he's down there right now.
Thank you, Jackie. And thank you, Jackie and Rosalinda, for sharing your stories with all of us. You two and your families have brought so much love and joy and light into all of our lives. I want to thank you for that as well.
No fue nada fácil, fue difícil, pero aquí estamos, gracias a Dios.
Gracias, Jackie.
Jackie said it wasn't easy. It was something really difficult, but here we are.
Can y'all hear me now? Now I'd like to invite Suzie Pritchett up from the Drake Legal Clinic, or do you want to share from there? Up here?
I can just stay sitting. That's
Okay.
fine.
Do you want me to?
Oh, okay. I will come in and stand.
Okay. Let me pull up your PowerPoint.
No, actually, yeah.
Okay.
Muy bien.
How do we edit? Okay, great. So, again, my name is Suzie Pritchett, and I am the director of the Drake Legal Clinic, which is a program at Drake Law School that allows students who are in their second and third years of law school to actually work on cases as part of their legal training. And I always describe legal clinics housed in law schools as a win-win because law students get excellent training under the supervision of a faculty member, and we are able to provide free legal representation for people in our communities. So I was the beneficiary of the Iowa Legal Clinic as a law student here at the University of Iowa a few years ago. And if anybody's wondering what the definition of intimidation is, it is talking about asylum law and immigration law in front of the person who taught you asylum and immigration law, who my professor, Barbara Schwartz, is in the audience today. So no pressure, right? Well, I'm just here to give a little bit of context and background information about what our asylum law regime looks like in the United States. I thought Manny had a really interesting way of framing this discussion when he said that we have to ask ourselves what our responsibilities are and what our obligations are. We have obligations to the international community that we have signed up to when we became signatories to the 1951 Convention relating to the status of refugees. This is an international law. The United States doesn't often obligate itself internationally, but this is one treaty that we did sign up to, which gave us the definition of a refugee. And if I can get my PowerPoint here. to open up. So when we signed up to the Refugee Convention, we adopted, and through subsequent legislation, adopted into our domestic laws, the definition of a refugee, which doesn't mean anybody who wants to come to the United States. It doesn't mean a migrant. It is a very specific definition. And this is a lot of words on the screen, but I put this here because it is the guiding principle, and it is the definition that every non-citizen who applies for asylum and wants to remain in the United States permanently must meet, okay? So I'm just gonna read it now, but keep this in mind as you think about some of the stories that you saw in the video, and obviously the stories that you heard this evening, and think about how this definition reflects some of the realities that people are facing as they're fleeing violence in Central America. So the term refugee means any person who is outside any country of such person's nationality, or in the case of a person having no nationality, is outside any country in which such person last habitually resided, and who is unable or unwilling to return to, and is unable or unwilling to avail himself or herself of the protection of that country because of persecution or a well-founded fear of persecution on account of race, religion, nationality, membership in a particular social group, or political opinion. So note that this is a pretty specific definition. It tells us that only certain people can qualify for refugee status. And unfortunately, it's only people who have experienced harm on some very specific grounds. So I'm just going to take a minute and quickly talk through the constituent parts of what a refugee is, and we can think through some of the stories we've heard as we talk through the parts of this definition. So the big threshold question that the US government asks individuals who've experienced harm is whether or not the harm they've experienced rises to the level of persecution. And I had the honor of speaking with an undergraduate class today, and I got to ask students, well, what do you think persecution is? We really have no definition either but in the statute or in regulations about what persecution is. So we've had to rely on courts to give us case law that says this looks like persecution and this doesn't. And what we know from those cases is that things like harassment don't rise to the level of persecution. Things severe as physical assaults, rape, torture, those rise to the level of persecution. But there's often gray areas in between, and judges who hear asylum cases and make determinations on asylum cases will often have to do a case-by-case analysis. They do look at the totality of the circumstances in determining whether or not somebody's experienced harm that rises to the level of persecution. But again, it must be harm serious enough that the government is satisfied that somebody has in fact faced past persecution or will face future persecution if they return. There's some really interesting cases that look at whether or not somebody being prosecuted in their country of origin rises to the level of persecution. How severe must discrimination be before it rises to the level of persecution? Specific to some of the things we've talked about tonight, the government's been pretty clear in saying that generally dangerous country conditions isn't persecution, and economic poverty and economic disparities is not persecution, unless it's so severe that somebody is severely harmed. And so that is a threshold question that many people who are currently fleeing the violence in Central America might have trouble meeting. But that brings us to the next piece of the refugee definition. So it's not only that somebody must have experienced harm, because many people experienced harm. That harm must be inflicted on account of one of the 5 protected grounds that we saw in our refugee definition, right? Race, religion, nationality, political opinion, or membership in a particular social group. This is really hard to prove because basically somebody who applies for asylum has to prove their persecutor's motive, right? They have to show that the persecutor was harming them because of one of these 5 protected grounds. And oftentimes, Judges want to see evidence that somebody was targeting somebody on account of a protected ground. It's hard to know why somebody has harmed somebody else and to get into their mind, much less if that person's half a world away and across multiple international borders. So this is also a very difficult piece of the refugee definition and proves a hurdle for many people applying for asylum. That brings us to the 5 protected grounds, right? Only individuals who have been targeted on account of these 5 protected grounds qualify for asylum. Note that there are some interesting things missing from these protected grounds, right? Gender, occupational status, right? We heard some people being targeted because they owned businesses. Family. Interestingly, over the years, immigration advocates have kind of pushed the boundaries of what our asylum law and regime is, who it protects. And the membership in a particular social group ground has really been used as one area to expansively define who our asylum regime will grant status to. And so it's a very, very complicated area of law to assert that somebody's been persecuted on account of a particular social group. It requires a specific analysis, and it requires the asylum seeker themselves to describe clearly what their particular social group is that they've been targeted on. Interestingly, people in asylum proceedings before the US government are not given an attorney by the government or at the government's expense to go through this process with them. And so for individuals who are asserting these cases themselves without representation, they have to navigate this complex legal structure to be able to make out a viable claim and win asylum before the immigration court. So, statutory bars to asylum. Even if somebody demonstrates that they experienced past persecution, even if they can show that the person who harmed them was motivated to harm them because they were a member of one of these protected grounds or protected groups, there's still other bars that might render somebody ineligible. One of them being that you must apply for asylum within 1 year of arrival in the United States. Again, raises really interesting questions about fairness, access to justice. How would somebody crossing the border know if they hadn't, been told that, if they don't have access to a lawyer, that they need to file for asylum within 1 year of arrival? Also, having any sort of criminal history will make somebody ineligible for asylum. So those are some of the other bars that even if somebody is able to establish that they meet the definition of a refugee, there might be other things that render them ineligible. So I just pulled up a couple of quick statistics to frame the rest of our discussion this evening. These are some stats. 76,000 migrants crossed the border without authorization in February. I think a large number of those are seeking asylum. I think the video we saw said 100,000 more recently. So these are really large numbers of people who are certainly fleeing situations that are dangerous. The closer legal question is whether or not our asylum law is going to bend and fit these claims to give these people immigration status. I certainly think that, if we are coming away tonight thinking about what's next, we should be asking ourselves, are we satisfied with the definition of a refugee? Or should we be expanding that definition to encapsulate other types of harm or to be responding to some of the current political crises that are that people are facing in Central America? 50,000 adults are currently in ICE custody, which is one of the highest numbers ever. In 2018, 65% of asylum cases before the immigration court were denied, so we have a very high denial rate. There is a very close correlation between somebody being denied and whether or not they had an attorney. It's much more likely that somebody is going to win their asylum claim if in fact they have an attorney. Unfortunately, there are only so many attorneys who can handle cases for free. A lot of people aren't in a position to hire an attorney, and if they can't get representation, they have to go through the immigration court process themselves and put forth this very complicated asylum claim all on their own. This also applies to children who are in immigration court proceedings. So there's another systematic piece of this that we can all ask whether or not that's fair and if that's something we would like to see change. Winning asylum, like so many things, depends on the judge and importantly, whether or not an applicant is represented by an attorney, which I just spoke about. And then again, the asylum applicant themselves bears the burden of establishing that they meet the definition of a refugee under the Immigration and Nationality Act. So I'm happy to answer more specific questions about the asylum application process more generally, and about some of the cases I've handled. But I think this is a good place for us to open it up for questions and see where we go from here. Yeah. Yes. Oh. Okay, I'm going to give the microphone to our translator real quick.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Or I guess you have your own microphone.
I think I do. I just wanted to correct one error I made in my interpretation. When Jackie was talking about the friend of hers who is at the border, I did not correctly translate it. He's currently incarcerated at the border. She said he's a prisoner there right now. So he's in detention.
Thank you so much. Great, so thank you again for sharing your stories. Thank you, Suzie, for your presentation. Before we begin our Q&A, I just wanted to say that we sort of like to end with a call to action, or at least a sort of, something for those of you who want to take next steps or feel stuck or feel like you've heard things that are inspiring to you and you don't really know where to go from here, as is often the case with events like this. And I would say that for those of you who feel that way, you're certainly not alone, especially given current news coming at us about the border and about policy decisions being made about the border, and then the stories that we're hearing. So first of all, I would just encourage you to continue listening to the stories of people in your community over the stories being told to you by politicians who are removed from them. So upholding the stories of people who have these experiences, I think, is incredibly important. I would also encourage you to look for communications from the Catholic Worker House, which is an organization that directly serves people affected by these issues in our community. As someone who works for the Center for Human Rights, my organization does not do direct service because we are sponsored by a state institution. But we love partnering with organizations that do direct advocacy and do direct service, and they do wonderful things in the community, providing basics, needs, advocating for people. And I would also just encourage you to look for communication from them, from us, about events like this, where you can meet like-minded people and find new ways to serve and advocate within your communities. And thank you all again for coming out for an evening event like this, and it's encouraging to see so many people here. We'll stick around for a couple of minutes here, but we need to start taking the room down, but please feel free to come talk to any of us. Thank you again.
Quizás algunas personas más